Hi, property people. Thanks for joining us today. As always, we will be sharing ideas, experiences, problems, and solutions for property people like you. Our interviews will get you to know some of the most active professionals in the industry that have achieved some pretty impressive stuff. Hearing about their successes, failures, strategies, and insights, we really hope you enjoy. Just had a really good chat with Alex from Sillence Hurn. He's the managing director of a surveying company, doing all sorts of stuff from procurement to building surveying, project management, working on single units, multi-unit developments based out in the south of England. Really, really, really good guy. And I've met him a while ago in a networking event, and I've seen his business grow from pretty much when he launched it 3 years ago. And he's got a fantastic track record. And we go into a fair amount of detail on lots of stuff, including modular, which is a big buzzword right now in the construction industry, and things like build costs. So hope you enjoy. Do share, like, comment, all those sorts of things. And hope to speak with you again soon. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Property People. Today, I'm very excited to be joined with Alex Hurn, Managing Director of Sillence Hurn. Sillence Hurn work with property managers, private landlords, property developers, providing a full range of surveying services, a very bespoke and personalized service, may I add. Sillence Hurn, as a firm, have a wealth of experience operating mainly across the south of England, Hampshire and London. Hampshire, an area where I've recently moved to myself. So I'm very, very happy to have you on the show, Alex. How are you today?
Yeah, no, good. It's good to hear you've moved down to the sunny south coast.
Yeah. Literally yesterday morning, I went out to take a nice long walk across the beach, and the sun was shining on the water, and it kind of twinkled. It was very nice.
Lovely. Yeah. No, it's lovely down here. I mean, obviously, me being a Southampton local, I kind of walking distance from the marina, the harbour. So no, it's lovely. Good to have you down here.
Good. Well, we're going to be meeting up soon as well. But in the meantime, I wanted to get us to share some of your background and experience. This is all about sharing ideas, experiences, problems, and solutions. And I think where you are in the market, you've got a very good view of certain talking points that have become quite serious, which in my mind, we're always trying to solve the affordable housing crisis. And that's kind of like everything that we do, whether we're providing funding or construction or planning or this, that, and the other within the property, creating better accommodation for tenants or for homeowners. So where Sillence Hurn comes in, we are very, I think we've got some great talking points. But before we get into all of that, what I always like to know is, who was Alex at school? Did you always want to be a surveyor when you grew up?
No. I mean, I kind of fell into it as an industry. I mean, like most people in Oxford, from my experience, most people in property, they have a tenuous link there with family or relatives having and being involved in property. My father is a builder by trade, so he has a construction business, and kind of from a very young age, he built our house that I grew up in. So a very young age, I was sort of shifting bricks around, knocking up cement in the cement mixer, and kind of grew up in a building site, if you like. So I kind of my summers, Christmases were spent helping him, labouring for him, getting the whip cracked on me on a building site to get some cash in my pocket for the weekends. And I kind of, when I got to sort of 15, 16, 17, probably I kind of realised, well, actually, I don't think this is for me. I'm a bit of a pansy, if you like. I can't see myself being up on a roof in January, laying tiles and it's -3 degrees. Yeah, it's not for me. So I thought, okay, well, I kind of like the industry as a whole. It's kind of it's a cool industry. It's an interesting industry. I like visual seeing things being built, being made. Quite a practical person. So there's kind of next best solutions were architecture or some form of surveying, and architecture being a 7-year degree and a lot of learning, I don't think I had, to be honest, I didn't have the patience for that. So I kind of fell into what's the easiest solution? Building surveying. So I remember doing a week's work experience with Haslam's. I don't know if you've heard of Haslam's before, and the agents and surveyors in Reading base where I grew up. I remember going out with a building surveyor at the time, and I must have been about 15. My mum used to work there as a secretary. And I remember just seeing he drives around, he meets people, he goes for a coffee. Kind of, this is the life. This is a good gig here. It's a good gig. So I remember thinking, that building surveying is the route we go. And since then, I haven't looked back really.
Interesting. So, so when you were on site, you said you started quite young though as well. So like before 16, you were kind of just doing laboring, like shoveling kind of rubble from one end of the site to the other.
That's it. Yeah, I think you realise when you're a labourer and when you're sort of just assisting on a building site, you realise that the majority of the time you spend on a building site, you're just moving things from one place to another. You don't actually do any building. You're literally moving bricks from the back of the van to next to the house so the bricklayer can lay them. So it's like you spend your whole day just moving things around. It was I think my granddad was a builder, my uncle's a builder, my dad's a builder, and I kind of bucked the trend by being the sort of the first Hurn to go to university, if you like.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you made waves within your family, bucking a trend, and went to university. Where did you go to university out of interest?
Bristol UE, so University West of England.
And it was this. So it was the work experience prior to going to. What did you study at A levels to get into this?
Art, geography, maths, and business. I think maths didn't last long. That got dropped at AS level, and then we just sort of went through the easier ones: building, business studies, geography, and art. Yeah. So it's a kind of eclectic mix, to be honest. Yeah.
But the business module helped you with obviously setting up Sillence Hurn eventually.
Yeah, I suppose you would say that. Yeah, it kind of gives you a good basis of understanding. I think from again with family being self-employed, I think and being around that and seeing and I think naturally you kind of see what it takes and the kind of autonomy you get on big growing up from in a family where your family, your parents are self-employed. I think that becomes quite appealing to you from quite a young age to have that freedom, and I think that's probably what drove it to me to start up the business.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's a crazy stat. I don't know what the number is exactly, but it is a vast majority or the probability is so much higher if you've had parents that were entrepreneurs, the likelihood that you follow a same path. So that's obviously helped you along the way as well. But before you set up Sillence Hurn, I think you had a stint for about 7 years prior in an organization.
Yeah, no. So I moved. So I went to uni, came down, did a placement year in a firm called Simpson Hilda in the New Forest, like a boutique consultancy. They had a small surveying team there, but they were sort of an architectural-led practice, so mostly architecture. And I did a stint there for a year, went back to uni. They offered me to go back, incentivized me to go back after uni. So then I ended up sort of moving down, ended up on the south coast. Did 7 years there, and then kind of made the move on to setting up the business.
And that, so yeah, I mean, in the back of your mind, was it always that I'm going to be setting up my own business and this is a stepping stone, let me learn the ropes? Or was it kind of, did it come out organically where you thought, bloody hell, this is good. I think I can do it better.
I think a bit of both of those, to be honest. I think I was always destined, like we were saying earlier, always destined to do something on my own or have something that's mine. And I was always getting told that obviously building surveying, you probably don't know many building surveyors, you probably know more QSs and those kind of people, but building surveyors are, I don't think they mind me saying this if any of them are listening, but they're strange creatures. They like looking at buildings that are falling down, got cracks in, like looking at probing damp walls. historically, the view of building surveyors is quite staid and historic and quite different. And everyone used to say to me when I kind of started, I'm like, bloody hell, are you a building surveyor? I didn't think you were a building surveyor. I thought you'd be like a commercial agent or like a valuer or like a GP surveyor. So I think that kind of drove me to think, okay, well, actually, maybe there's a little bit of a niche here that we can create. We can start to sort of do something a little bit different, and sort of run a building surveying led business in a very different way. And I think that kind of probably spurred me on a little bit more.
Okay, good. And so tell us, when you launched Sillence Hurn, when you launched it, and how things are going, what you've been up to, and who you're working with, etc.
Yeah, so we started in 2019, just before COVID and during Brexit, which was perfect timing. We just finished financial year 3, end of April. So, and yeah, I mean, we've grown 150% year on year. We're sort of £1 million business now, where there's 14, actually now 15 people in the team, full-time employees. And yeah, we're sort of quite a young, ambitious, quite progressive business. We've kind of built the business over the last year to have a separate building surveying team, and then we're building out a project team at the moment. So who would deal with fund monitoring, project monitoring, and project management work, and then the building surveying team will deal with more traditional surveying activities, so purchase surveys, technical DD, dilapidations, commercial landlord tenant work as well. So yeah, that's kind of the route for business. We're kind of obviously set up in Southampton as the head office. We're slowly moving up the M3, and we have a small sort of satellite office in London where we do a lot of sort of commercial tenant and landlord work as well. So yeah, it's been a whirlwind. It's been interesting. But yeah, we've managed to weather it reasonably well. But obviously the market's been very good as well in the grand scheme of things. I know that globally there's been a lot going on, but the local, as we know, the local national property market has been kind to us of late.
Absolutely. I mean, it has been, in terms of market conditions, great for all service providers within the property industry. I think for solicitors, for finance, obviously I'm familiar with that, but also in construction, surveying, etc. But do you think that that's ever going to, well, obviously ever is a strong word, but in the next, let's say 10 years, do you foresee that slowing down over that period? I mean, you might have peaks and troughs, but
obviously at the moment you've got the perfect storm, haven't you? You've got inflation's going up, build costs are spiraling kind of out of control, if you like. So it's kind of squeezing the apple a little bit uncomfortably, I think, for a lot of developers and potentially lenders as well. So I think that, well, I mean, I don't want to get my crystal ball out, but I think obviously the narrative at the moment in the press is that we're all heading into this recession. Things are going to be, the economy is going to be shrinking, etc., etc. It seems to be their new narrative now, rather than obviously following on from the Ukraine war. But I think for the next year it's going to be a bit rocky. I think there's going to be quite a lot of distressed sellers out there. I think there's going to be a lot of shake up in the industry. I think there's going to be some quite big construction companies going under potentially, with all of the costs rising. Someone's taking the hit somewhere, and I think everyone's going to become a little bit more cautious. But I think again, like we'll come out of it in a year's time, and things will carry on back to normal. But I can't see. With nothing's being built, the pipeline's so small for new houses anyway, and nothing's on the market, so that's kind of propping the market up. The fact there is no supply there.
Yeah.
If they could work out a way to build quickly and build efficiently, then obviously that it might help the prices sort of level out a little bit. But there's nothing coming to market. I mean, that's coming first hand from someone trying to buy a house.
Yeah, right.
There's minimal options.
Well, I mean, you used the phrase there, kind of build quickly, build efficiently. And there are a few reasons that that are thrown out there as to why we're not building enough houses. It could be the planning system, it could be the access to capital, it could be the ways that we build are just a little bit predated now. So we've got things like modular and a variety of different things that might help us speed things up. From a building surveyor point of view, though, these old Victorian houses that were built many moons ago that have lasted the test of time, like 100 years plus. When you're doing your building surveyor work, do you have a favorite type of construction that you think, this is the best, this is the fastest, this is the most quality, this is the most cost efficient, this has the least amount of problems? Do you see anything like that? Do you come across any kind of presumptions like that?
Well, you mentioned modular. I mean, we're actively involved with a couple of modular schemes at the moment. One springs to mind, one in Abingdon, Oxford. We are helping the developer construct 4 new units, waterside, riverside frontage, which are really like luxury. One will be ranging from sort of £1 million to sort of 400,000 pound units, and we are constructing that, managing that for them completely modular. So the whole thing is built in the factory. Literally, it's dropped on site, and then the facade is built, and otherwise it's done. And that project, which we estimated build cost would be sort of circa 700, 800 this was 12 months ago, so it's all pre crazy levels of inflation. We're delivering it for sort of 30% less under modular, and wow. that's going from spade in the ground, which started this week, and the modular units are already pretty much 3/4 of the way built, so they're being delivered to site at the first week in June, and that'll be erected in 2 weeks. So your actual construction phase on site is 6 weeks, 4 units. So when you look at it like that, and you see the efficiencies how they're building them in the factories, and you go to the factories and you see these, you're walking around a flat which is 1 unit, and they're just going to drop it on site. It's hard to think, how is that not the future? You know what I mean? It's crazy. And I think last month LNG, I was reading in Property Week that LNG have finished building their purpose-built factory for their new modular business that they're going to be testing. And that's what it's going to take for it to take off. I think you're going to need a couple of the bigger funds, the bigger lenders to get behind it, because obviously where we do a lot of fund monitoring as well, and subprime lenders, challenger lenders don't have any interest in it. It's too risky for them. They can't get their head around the changing the mechanism of how you draw money, draw money down to a developer.
That's always the tricky part, I think. I found is that because they want these upfront deposits to start the work, which makes sense as well. I don't know whether there's insurance policies that can be put in place, or I mean, how have you got around that on this occasion? Do you know?
It's cash funded, so it's there's no debt involved, but yeah, you have to. Essentially, the value is in the unit is built. It's just in someone's warehouse, so that you have the value there. You've paid for the goods, and we have you have it on every drawdown or every payment that's provided to the modular company. A vesting certificate accompanies that to basically say, look, the company that developer is in ownership of those goods or that those units. If anything was to happen, blah blah blah. But obviously, then you still have the risk of if that warehouse burnt down or something like that. That's I think if you can't see it and touch it and see it on site and see it fixed to site. Obviously, it does provide another level of risk. But I mean, if fundamentally that viewpoint has just got to change if we want to move forward. I mean, it's a manufacturing. It's not construction. It's almost a new industry. It's not bricks and mortar. It's modular.
I think that like for certain things like that, there should be an insurance policy provider that can maybe step in and capitalize on that as well. With certain modular manufacturers, if they do regular checks and that they're fireproof type warehouses, etc., and they've got a good track record, then maybe that there's something there to be. Because I think modular does have legs, certainly. I mean, the fact that you can be only on site 6 weeks and everything else is done off site this particular one, the 4 units, is it a UK based modular manufacturer, or are they overseas?
Yeah. So they're based in Southampton, funny enough.
Oh wow.
And they all of their materials are Eastern European. All their labour is Eastern European as well. But they all, it's basically having a site team, a build team, but in a warehouse building it. And then it comes to the site ready to go. The critical thing with modular from a technical aspect, getting into a bit of detail now, but the coordination between the groundworks and the modular units itself. So you have to make sure that groundworks is literally to the millimeter exactly how it should be. So when that unit comes down and drops onto that brickwork, it's there's no issues there.
Have you ever come across the situation where it was slightly out?
Thankfully not, but I've heard of stories, where they've brought it in and it's been a little bit too big or a little bit too small, and then they've had to take it back and obviously redo the groundworks, and it's added like another month delay onto the site. But I mean that's the key technical element really that you have to that has to be coordinated quite carefully.
That's very, very interesting. So you think that these modern methods of construction need to be embraced? Then we need to be more innovative. We can't go back to bricks and mortar, block and brick, and that sort of thing if we really want to be able to build faster, better, for longer. I think so. I think that, like you mentioned planning earlier, I mean planning at the moment, I mean you wait 3-4 months for a decent consent, you've got to do detailed design, because you're not going to commit the architect on to doing building reg design. You're not going to commit your consultants on costs until you've got the planning. So you've got a 2-3 months planning process. You've then got a month, 2 months design. You've then got 2 months procurement, 3 months procurement. So that scheme that we're doing in Abingdon probably has taken over a year from acquisition. In traditional terms, would probably take twice as long. If not 2 years, 2 and a bit years from conception to completion. So you think about the capital that will be tied up for that period. It's obviously it's a substantial increase for quite a simple scheme. So from a building surveyor's perspective, correct me if I'm wrong, and certainly provide a bit more detail, but do you only really get involved when there's something going wrong, and say, or like, oh my God, there's damp coming through, or there's a moving wall, we need to call a structural engineer to see how we can support this sort of thing? Is that the only time, or can you be called in earlier to kind of have more preventative measures put in place?
Yes, there's different ways. I mean, what you've described there is like the traditional way everyone looks at building surveyors, that they are there if you're buying a house or if you've got damp or you've got a leak, that they will come and identify that for you and help you rectify that. But building surveyors, because our technical knowledge kind of when we're trained for RICS and we go through the APC process before you become a chartered surveyor, you touch on all these different elements. So you touch on sort of construction tech, building pathology. You then touch on contract management, commercial management, design and specification. So you're learning. It crosses all of the different competencies. So you're in a. It's almost like you've got the perfect pedigree to be a project manager or a lead consultant, because you kind of know how every different element works. And that's kind of how we pitch ourselves, really, is that we can. And how a lot of developers we work with, including the Abingdon one, is that we will be the turnkey provider for the PM, for the delivery of the project. So we will be involved from just after planning, maybe before planning sometimes if they want some cost and feasibility advice, usually after planning all the way through to handover.
And you mentioned a variety of other services as well that you're providing at Sillence Hurn, which is kind of project managers and was it QS as well?
Yeah.
So these are other complementary skill sets that are required on a site, on a project, that if they came to you, it wouldn't be just a building surveyor. You'd be able to have access to the skill set, the knowledge, the intel, to be able to advise on things like build costs, things like would you have where project managers going to give you the project kind of timeline and what needs to happen when? What else? Do you have any other skill sets like?
Yeah, I think procurement's a big one that gets overlooked,
Right.
especially for sort of for developers, that they don't. You can be quite creative with how you procure projects. Like you don't have to just sort of get all your design done, send it out to a main contractor, get them on board. You can split it up in different packages. You can go a construction management route. You can get early engagement with a strip out enabling works project program, which will then obviously, when you come to starting the actual work, you know exactly what you're dealing with, which is really useful on like a conversion or a works an existing building, a renovation refurb job. So you would usually procure a strip out an enabling works pack. So you kind of strip the building out. You know exactly what you're working with. You know exactly what the details are. Or you can go to like D&B has obviously grown in popularity in the last 10 years, where you can engage a contractor early on a fixed price under planning drawings usually. And you can, as long as they're experienced in that, you can use their design team, their PI, their risk. They can carry all the risk for the project, and you can get it moving a lot sooner and get cost certainty a lot quicker. So there's usually different ways that, again, early involvement with consultant can help you sort of review these different strategies and help you sort of understand, help you deliver, find a procurement strategy that would work best for what you're trying to achieve.
Does the procurement fall under the umbrella of a QS by profession, or is that
QS or PM, depending on how
right?
they're appointed? Yeah.
With regards to build costs that have been going up, I'm sure it's something that you encounter on a daily basis these days. What sort of price increases have you been seeing? I've seen you talk at events, and I've seen you mention a few crazy situations, but can you give us a little indication of what you've been seeing in the build cost market, and why you think it's happening, and where do we go from here?
Well, that's a tough one. Very that's the $1 million question, mate. Yeah, I mean, like you say, I mean, there's the last year. I think generally, I think there's some crazy stats that say that the cost of increase of like 20, 23, 24% across the board, construction costs. Most of those initially was around material costs. So obviously with COVID, the lockdowns, big plants in Europe, in Germany, Eastern Europe, closing down, unable to get materials, obviously drove supply and demand up. Well, the demand up and there's no supply, so obviously hence the initial surge in material costs. So I think timber, plasterboard, I think timber in particular is one that's been still fluctuating massively now, because I think majority of a large portion of the timber used in UK construction comes from Eastern Europe, so Ukraine and Russia. So I think that's one that's still is due to fluctuate for the near future. But again, I mean, it's labour costs as well going up. There's lack of labour. Obviously, again, the big European labour market in London haven't been coming back since COVID. A lot of them have stayed home, so that's been driving up a bit of a labour shortage in those markets, and obviously driving smaller contractors into bigger contracts, leaving a bit of a regional shortage for labour. So yeah, I don't really see. Obviously, and then you have the employee, the obviously tax rises for employers. So obviously that's driving overheads and prelims up as well for main contractors. So I mean, across the board, it's a bit of a shitter, to be honest. So in regards to where it's going, I don't see it cooling down. I mean, tenders, we're probably this week we've just got a tender back for a project, £1 million one-off house in Winchester. It came out 10% higher than we were expecting. Again, just it's just the same stories really. It's just availability of labour and things taking a little bit longer. So you're just building that program out a little bit longer than you would have thought. Like we would estimate 40 weeks. Contract comes back to no, maybe 50 weeks. So obviously that has a cost implication as well. So yeah, I think for the next year, again, like I was saying earlier, the next year I think it's still going to take time to level itself out. It's going to be going up, and it's still going to be difficult. But again, I think that's another beauty, putting the modular flag back up. And there's another benefit for modular really, is that you lose those risks of if you're going traditional route and there's delays for material supplies, etc., then and you're paying for people to be on site, then you're losing money. Whereas if it's being built in a factory on a delivery program for a modular company, then you're not losing money. There's not an argument with the contractor saying they want an extension of time for 8 weeks. It's being delivered in a factory, so there's a lot less that can go wrong.
If we went down the route of doing more modular, would that remove the need for building surveyors because everything is kind of already checked off? And would that happen, do you think?
I don't think so. I think the role would definitely change, but I think that, again, for developers and then clients that are still being involved with construction, they still need to be represented to manage that contract. There's still a contract that needs to be delivered. There's still a contract there's still a contract that needs to be set up. There's still a contract that needs to be monitored. There's payments that need to be monitored. There's quality that needs to be monitored. But obviously, the role would change. And like I said earlier, that coordination piece between ground workers and services in, utilities in, and delivery of the unit is still important. And you've still got the same compliance checks at the end, so you still need to make sure that it's building control compliant. You've got a 10-year warranty that's compliant. You've got sound tests. You've got an air test. It's still the same build process, but it's just a lot slicker and a lot more streamlined. Our cost would be less. Like the build cost would be less because our involvement is for a shorter period. So it would be a more efficient service.
And this and going back to the modular conversation, there are a variety of different nuances of this modular stuff. I mean, SIP panels being one of them, where you kind of build all the different kind of sides of the house and then piece it together on site, and that can be done quite quickly. And then you just have to do the internals, or you can get ones which are literally like a pod, which has all the internals and it just kind of plops into place. Is there a preference that you've got of that sort of different style of modular, or you kind of keeping an open mind right now?
My view is that the more you can do offsite, the better. So especially when you're talking about those size developments. So those ones, the one we're doing in Abingdon, they are literally. We went. Well, I didn't go, but one of our surveyors went last week to the warehouse to sign off their third payment of 4, and it literally is like you're walking around a flat in a warehouse, fully windows in, painted, floors down, tiles in, bathrooms in, kitchens in, lights are on. It's like to be tested. All the circuits are being tested before you connect the mains on site. So it literally is like you're walking through a show flat, but it's in a factory in Marchwood in Southampton. It's not on the River Thames in Abingdon. So it's I mean, if you could do that, why wouldn't you do that? Is my view.
And with your role as a building surveyor and the variety of different other services that you provide, the main clients that you kind of state that you work with are private landlords, property managers, property developers. Do you work with contractors? Are you ever hired by a contractor?
Yeah. So I mean, I know we've been speaking a lot about resi this morning, but I mean, we're probably 80% B2B business. So majority of our stuff is commercially led. We do work with contractors. We're doing some stuff with Waits Construction on their consulting side, and we are also we're speaking with another contractor at the moment about quite a large scheme in Brighton where we're going to help them with sort of surveying and site management and progress management duties. So yeah, no, contractors are a client type for us. Yeah.
And lenders, I know that you've done some work with lenders. So who do you enjoy working with the most?
You can't ask me that, can you? They're all going to be listening.
Who's more fun? The developers doing these great developments and making loads of money in inverted commas, or is it the the contractors who get into the nitty gritty of it all, that a little bit more technical perhaps on what you're trying to do, and maybe can have a better conversation with you, or is it the lenders who just care about getting their money back?
I think yeah, I mean, I'm biased because I've always enjoyed projects. I mean, so I've enjoyed problem solving, getting into the nitty gritty of a project, being down there, being on the site, walking the site, talking about issues, thinking about issues. So I would be biased and say, yeah, sort of developers and sort of construction related activities. But I think the lending on the lending side is good work for us, to be honest, and it's a service line which has grown massively in the last 5 years in the industry overall because of the rise of all the subprime lenders, bridges coming to market. And our experience is I think we're on about 7 or 8 panels now for sort of challenger lenders and stuff in the market. But there's still a lot of lenders out there that don't really have that DD in place, and we have a conversation about to them. We approach them and say, look, do you have a panel for monitoring surveyors? How does it work? And they don't really have much in place, to be honest. They just do it on an ad hoc basis. And I think that's going to become more and more prevalent. That, again, it's transferring that risk, isn't it? I think that as things can become a little bit trickier, when the market's tricky like it is in the moment, I think that there's going to be a bigger requirement for surveyors to sort of be watching over loans rather than watching it in-house.
Yeah, I mean, having experienced the lending space, I do know that not many of them have those expertise in-house, nor have them on a regular basis. But development finance is obviously a little bit different. You got your project monitoring surveyor, but the certainly bridge lenders, don't necessarily have them on call regularly. I recently had a call from somebody that actually said that they wanted to provide that service, even though they didn't have necessarily the RICS qualifications themselves. They felt that they could be that problem solver and then bring in people like yourself who've got the necessary skills, or bring in the relevant skill set to problem solve along the way for lenders. But it is interesting to know where you feel more comfortable, because then it makes me think as well, you've got all of this experience, you've got all of this knowledge, you know how to build stuff. Have you ever thought about taking the developer position yourself as well?
I think, yeah, one day I think it would be sacrilege for me not to do it, to be honest. And I like the idea of, I think at the moment, I think my all my energy and time goes into growing the consultancy business, and I think that will be the case for the next 3 to 5 years. But then I think after, once hopefully it can run itself. I don't know if that's ever achievable, but once it gets to a certain size, I think, and there's a bit more sort of cash available, I would like the idea of doing something myself. And obviously we're in a good position because obviously, like you say, we know the construction side. We also probably get to see a lot of developments that maybe don't go or come across our plate a lot earlier than the general public would get, to be honest. So
yeah, you've got good access to distressed deals, let's say. You'd be able to problem solve for it, and I think you've probably got a lot of goodwill as well amongst many lenders and investors and developers, etc. So they'd probably be willing to support you in taking over and rescuing.
Yeah, and I think, but I think working for developers a lot, I think it's a very stressful. Your balls on the line. Everyone wants a piece of them, don't they? So it's like it's not a too comfortable position to be in a lot of the time. So hopefully one day, but it's not a priority at the moment.
What would you say is the biggest mistake that developers make that you see time and time again, that that you think that if only they would listen, or if only they knew, then we wouldn't
cutting corners.
Yeah,
cutting corners early doors. So just not spending enough money early doors on getting or not spending enough time as well on that sort of detailed design / procurement stage. Just being like, I think again, the bridge sort of finance has a part to play in that. Obviously it's time pressure, and obviously every time is money. But if you can get to a stage where I would say, where you're putting a spade in the ground, there's no unknowns, there's no provisional sums on the contract, everything is detailed out, everything is fully agreed, finalized, that contract is signed, sealed, delivered, everything's in place, then from a developer's perspective, there isn't anything that particularly can go wrong. You're locked in. That's 100% certainty. But obviously, the trap you fall into is that you want to get it on site quick because you need to. Your finance being agreed, therefore you're paying interest on it. Oh, we'll agree that later. Let's get on site. Let's go on site, and then you kind of end up 3-4 months in. You go, well, we haven't bottomed this out. Oh, now we need to make a decision on this. But that wall needs to move a meter that way. But that's going to have a knock-on effect on that. And it's suddenly what could have been a £500 discussion is now like a 20 grand discussion and a month's delay. You know what I mean? It just escalates. It's like escalates. I know in an ideal world it's impossible to get into that position. Sometimes things need to move and we need to be productive. But I think there's if you can spend that extra bit of time at the start just bottoming out all unknowns, it does save a lot of headaches down the line.
I think that's one of the problems that a lot of developers have is that they have this they know that it's expensive to get involved, but they think, okay, that's kind of like my equity in the deal, which is against what the lender's going to give me, and that's it. But then there's a lot of the planning stuff that that they need to also fork out for reports, to manage, as you say, the unknowns. And then if for whatever reason they've exchanged on the site and they haven't spent all that money, then they're kind of committed to it. Or the sellers telling them like, we want you to commit, and you're thinking, well, I don't want to commit any money before I commit to the site. It's like, which one comes first? And it's always a bit of a risk. But from one developer that was very experienced that I was speaking to recently, he just said, look, we have a war chest for that sort of thing. We know that we're going to spend maybe 100 to 200 grand a year on deals that don't proceed, but we just fork out on them. And if we think that it's going to be a goer, great, but we're going to make far more than that 200 grand over the next 24 months on 1 or 2 deals. So that's the way that they operate. But I guess you got to get to a certain level to be able to do that. For a lot of SMEs, they don't necessarily have that kind of cash to just burn to mitigate risk early on. So then they cut those corners and probably get have those 20 grand conversations rather than the 500 ones.
And I think it's the nature of developers, to be honest. They like the buzz, they like the unknown, they like taking that risk. You know what I mean? I think that's it's the nature of their character that they don't want to be trawling sat in long meetings, trawling through detail or spending that time. They just want to sort of get on and take the risk. You know what I mean? It's kind of in their blood.
Yeah, it'll be all right. It'll be all right. Don't worry about it. And so with the future opportunities, we've talked a lot about modular as a way of containing build costs and retaining certainty within projects. In terms of other opportunities within property development and construction and building surveying, where do you see the biggest opportunities outside of, let's say, modular? Where do you see the next opportunities coming up?
Well, obviously, sustainability is the next thing, isn't it? I think that obviously the government's got the ambition of all buildings to be B rating, or commercial buildings to be B rating by 2030. So that in itself is going to be a massive industry, and a lot of buildings aren't going to get to that. Like, a lot of existing stock isn't going to get to that, so it's going to have to be knocked down and rebuilt. I mean, you're not going to be able to physically spend, well, you probably could, but by the time you've spent that money on that existing building to get it to that standard, you might as well build yourself a new building. Yeah. I think that's the one we're earmarking, and we're sort of looking into sort of looking into service lines and how we can get ourselves in a position to advise our clients on that kind of level of work. These commercial landlords that have sort of industrial estates, commercial buildings that are far outdated. I mean, they need a strategy, and if that's 2030, I mean, I know it's 8 years away, but I mean, it's a couple of 2-3 years there of work really to get those buildings up to scratch. So you need to start thinking cash flowing for it now. So I think the sustainability is the one that's going to be not going anywhere. ESG as well, with massive rise in commercial occupiers, the ESG strategy, and how that filters down to the workplace environment. So there's a lot of talk and work around that as well. So and I think on the resi side, I mean, we spoke about modular. I think that keep hearing a lot about co-living at the moment. I think there's going to be a big rise in that. We're doing a scheme in Kingston, which is converting student to co-living. Big European operators come over to the UK and wants to start rolling out quite large sites, 63 units, that one. So I think that's that might be the answer to a lot of old stock in London, that an old office stock that might be that might be sort of converted into resi. I think co-living is the next sort of favorite use class.
Yeah, that's so. With that, I find that the planning is a little bit tricky at times, to get the co-living status. So if you tell them that it's, for student accommodation, they're okay with it. But if you try and go co-living, it hasn't kind of well been established yet. But
yeah, a lot of planners don't know what it is. They don't know how to where it goes. Like you say, they don't know whether it sits in that student bracket, or whether it sits in a flat scheme with a bit of commercial space. They don't really know how to view it, to be honest. That's the issue. So it's more like the planners need to be educated a little bit on how it works and what it is they're trying to achieve.
Because I was speaking to some PBSA kind of specialists, both on the funding side and the construction side and development side. And they've done a lot of stuff across the UK over the last 10 years and now starting to do stuff on the continent because they're about 10 years behind us. And saying that the UK doesn't really have too many more great opportunities for PBSA. It's all been pretty well done now. There's very, very few sites that are, in close enough proximity to a university that would work. That said, with living costs going the way they're going, that co-living, for newly graduated uni people and the young professional market is actually quite a cool way of living for the first 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And they might be able to take more, let's say, secondary locations outside of the university campuses. So I do see there's a big opportunity there. I'm just waiting to see whether there's more take up of it and more how should I say it, acceptance from the planning.
Yeah, and like you say, I think it's going to be, like you say, with the flexible working now widely available. I mean, good co-living schemes, like you say, in more tertiary areas that don't have to be that well connected. Maybe have got facility amenities around them in a town centre, but a tertiary town that's got co-working or commercial space in it where people can work or use facilities. That seems to be quite a good option for the future generations, isn't it? But like you say, it's all about that planning piece, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you get involved in planning at all when a developer's saying, look, I want to go to build a 60-unit scheme? Is there any involvement in the planning application that you need to be part of, or is it once they get the planning and it's like, right, we're going to kick on and build this, that's where you really roll up your sleeves?
It's usually after planning, to be honest. I mean, unless we do cost plans, like really early stage cost plans before planning sometimes to sort of review buildability and feasibility of schemes, but majority of the time, hopefully the architects had a thought about how it's going to be built and how much it's going to cost. But yeah, no, usually after planning. Trying to get involved in planning, it's a bit of a nightmare.
And well, I mean, just going back to the procurement thing and talking about the future and opportunities and technology in this whole kind of prop tech industry, for the procurement, there's tools out there to help with that sort of thing. One of them that comes to mind is called C-Link. I don't know if you've come across that before.
Yeah, no, I've done Paul's podcast as well prior to this. So yeah, no, it's a good tool. It's a really good tool, to be fair. It's great for contractors and subcontractors looking to procure local subcontractors. And it would be good for consultants as well. But I think they need to once they're a bit more established and they've grown their database a bit more, it will be a really powerful tool. But it's definitely the future. Like if you had a tool there which vetted and did all of these sort of back of house admin for compliance and financial health of these companies before we had to gather tenders from them. It would save a lot of time.
Yeah, I think a lot. I'm very excited about the future of the UK housing market and construction and everything. I think just generally, I'm a big fan of technology and innovation, and I can see it happening in a big way here. And it sounds like that you're already at the forefront of a lot of that, and will be part of those solutions going forward, which is great. My final question is about other people that are looking to get into property. This is about property people. You're certainly a property person. I know that from all the people that we know in common, and the way you've grown your business so successfully, you really love what you do. If other people are looking to get involved into property in any aspect of it, what sort of attributes, what sort of things do they need to bear in mind to be able to be as successful as you've become?
Good question as well. I think with property, it's a very like you say, it's a very relationship-based industry. Like it's moving a little bit. That is diluting a little bit, where obviously tech and data online and stuff is moving a little bit away from that. But relationship is really everything. So I mean, I always say to my guys and my team, the younger guys, I always say when I speak at like sort of RHTS events, I always say that like I've built my business and my career around just chucking myself into everything. So I would always be that guy at networking events. I'd be everywhere. And I think that although it feels like, oh, that bloody Tuesday night, you've got to drive an hour to go to that event, and it's like you'd rather be at home on PlayStation, whatever, doing whatever when you're like 21, 22, like, but you don't realize that one person in that room you might meet, or you add them on LinkedIn, and then 3-4 years later, you kind of just been liking each other's posts, been catching up, and then you suddenly catch up and they give you like 100 grand of work a year. It's just things like that you just don't take for granted. I think that just give yourself the best opportunity to put yourself out there and really sort of build a network. I know it sounds a bit cliche, but I think that I can actually relate a lot of the success of the business back to those days.
Absolutely. Well, that's very much how we met. And now that I know you're down the road, we're gonna catch up for a coffee in due course. I'd like to thank you for joining us and sharing a lot of insights on everything to do with property development and building surveying in general. And we'll definitely do it again sometime. Let's see how the economy goes and which way the wind blows, and catch up and see what's next on the horizon. Thanks again for joining us, Alex.
Great stuff. Cheers, Sam.
Thanks for tuning in today. We've got lots more super active property people coming up, so keep up to date. Click the subscribe button, hit the bell icon, leave us a comment, share us and find us across social media, and we'll see you next time.